Shalom u'bracha. The first thing is a mazel tov to all of those b'nei aliyah who are about to be Messiah Masechta Shabbos, long, difficult Masechta, and embark on the journey of Masechta Erevin. A special mazel tov because the siyum, a big part of this Masechta was learned under the adverse circumstances of the Corona, whether it meant disruption in the normal Charusashafts and the normal Shiurim, the normal venue and comfort zone where these Shiurim and Charusashafts used to take place and are going to continue to take place. So it's a measure of Torah shalamadati bi'af, and Chazal teach us af chachmasi amdali, that the chachma, the Torah that a person learns in adversity and under adverse conditions, that's the chachma, that's amdalai, that stands to his defense in his Melchemes HaYetzer, and he's a Malamed Zchus on him. So there's a special siyum. It's a siyum of a Masechta learned under adverse circumstances. So I give you my bracha, Kashem shezachisem, l'sayim Masechta zu, kein tisku lahaschil, or l'sayim kol ha-Masechta shebashas. A special yeshikoyach to the me'arganim, to Agudas Yisrael, Daf Yomi Commission, and those that stand behind these shiurim and these limudim, standing as a friendly reminder, as a big brother, to be mechazik us and to be ma'orer us, to go mechoyel al choyel b'limud HaTorah, and to keep on reinforcing the conviction that Eloi at LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yolamai ela daled amis shel halacha bilvad, especially in these times of that we commemorate Churban Beis Hamikdash, as miyom shecharav Beis Hamikdash, Eloi LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yolamai ela daled amis shel halacha bilvad, and be having a kviyus to go through the whole entire Shas Masechta after Masechta b'kviyus without hefsek. That's giving HaKadosh Baruch Hu his Dalet Ames Shal Halacha, and giving the Shechina a makam v'shachanti b'soicham b'sachat kol echad v'yechad, and b'schus zeh, and b'schus HaTorah, v'ein shiur elo HaTorah hazois, we should be going from chayil al chayil and to be zoiche, that this should all serve as a catalyst to the Geula Shleima b'meher b'yameinu amen.
Shalom Aleichem everyone. I'm going to speak, Mr. Hashem, about the halachas of muktzah. The main sugya of muktzah is in Masechtas Be'ah, but there's a lot of it also in Masechtas Shabbos. You can't really know muktzah unless you learn muktzah in both Masechtas. What is muktzah? Actually, muktzah is a takana of the chachamim, and muktzah means that it has to be prepared. Whatever you use, or rather, whatever you move from before Shabbos, whatever you move has to be prepared from before Shabbos in order that you should be able to use it. So normally we say, Lo makzi inishmai dechazile, anything which is roy for a person, he automatically intends to use it. But there are certain things which a person does not intend to use, like something which has no use, like a stone in the street, and therefore they are muktzah. And we're going to discuss, but the bottom line is that it has to be prepared from before Shabbos. So even though the muktzah is only midrabanan, but like hamidi l'ramiz b'arai, so there's nothing, there's not rooms in the Torah, and there's a remez in the Torah because the Torah says v'hoya bayam hashishi Veichinu eis asher yaviu. That on Friday they prepared everything which they're going to bring on Shabbos. Actually, this pasuk we're talking about the man, which could use preparation, didn't have to do anything with it, but it's if they could prepare it if they want to, but everything should be prepared from before. So since the man tastes like everything you wanted to taste like, so if you wanted the man to taste like chopped liver, you had to have b'das before Shabbos that it should be already on Friday before Shabbos that it should taste like chopped liver. Then it's prepared for Shabbos. So once it's muktzah bein hashmashas, which is the beginning of Shabbos, that means it hasn't been prepared, you didn't intend to use it for anything, then it is muktzah automatically for the whole Shabbos. That's what Chazal say, kim dis katzoi bein hashmashas is katzoi l'kol yama. Why did the Chazal, why were they masaken muktzah? There are various reasons. The Rambam has 3 reasons. The Rabbi has another reason. That the Rambam says in at the end of Perek Chavdalad of Shabbos that since it says in the pasuk Chibaratay ma'asaz drachacha, you should machaber the Shabbos, not to do what you normally do on Shabbos. You shouldn't do what you normally want to do. You shouldn't do what you normally want during the week. And you shouldn't speak on Shabbos the way you speak during the week. So the Chacham said that you shouldn't move things on Shabbos the way you do during the week either. That's part of a covered Shabbos. And besides that, if someone will use things which he uses for his business, let's say a saw that he uses to cut wood, so we're afraid that maybe he'll use it on Shabbos, and he'll be over on Teichen, and be over on Machatach, and other Isurim, which is awesome in HaTorah. And the third reason the Rambam says, because there's some people who are retired basically and don't do anything the whole week. So how would it be noticeable that they are resting on Shabbos? So if they can't even move things which they normally would move during the week, so it becomes a shvisa hanikeres. And the Rabbi says it is because of Mishum Hatzah, which is mashma in the Gemara. That originally when they made the takana muktzah, everything was muktzah until they slowly let it go. And there were matter certain things. At the beginning it was people shouldn't come to carry on Shabbos, which it seems in the times of the Chazal made the Takana, there was people were not careful about this issue of carrying on Shabbos. So there are various types of muktzah. The bottom line of all of them is the same. As I said, it has to be prepared. One muktzah is, as Chazal call it, machmas chesaron kis. It is something which is valuable, and you don't want people to play around with it because you're afraid that it's going to get ruined, or it's going to get scratches or whatever it is. So, for instance, an example of that is a new car. You bought a new car. So you don't want the children to play around the car because you're afraid it'll get scratched up. You just bought it, spent a lot of money on it, or sometimes it's muktzah kiss because it's going to be a very big bother, a lot of work to if it gets broken to fix it again. For instance, a saken shel shchita, a chalaf, which people use for shchita, since it has to be very sharp and it has to be completely without any nicks in the cutting part of the blade. So if someone drops it, for instance, So unless you have some muzzle that it falls on the backside of the blade, if it's going to fall anywhere else, it's probably going to get nicks in the blade, and then it can take sometimes hours until you can straighten it back out again. With this, so there's a lot of work involved. So you don't want people to play around with it. So you're not going to let a person cut a watermelon with a sachen shel shchita, with a chalb used for shchita, because it's not intended for that. And plenty of knives around that can cut a watermelon, but this is a special knife, or a sachen shel mila, which is used for bris milah. Is a special. You don't want more than one nick in the whole thing. Some people don't want any nicks in it, and so therefore it's considered muktzah machmas sarkis. Another example is a passport. You don't want people playing around with your passport. You don't want your children to go and take your passport to the school for show and tell. You're afraid something's going to happen to it, and then it'll take you some time to get it again, and you might need it. So it's considered a valuable document. Included in this is, the Chazon Ish says, if you have a valuable painting, you paid $10,000 for a painting which you have on the wall. It's not attached to the wall, you're just hanging it on a hook on the wall, but you don't want people to touch it, you spent a lot of money for it, so that's considered muktzah machmas chasaron kiss. Now, since you're not going to do anything with it on Shabbos, for whichever type of muktzah machmas chasaron kiss it is, so it's not prepared in your mind to be used on Shabbos. So if for some reason you need it on Shabbos, you do need it on Shabbos, so you cannot. It's muktzah, and you cannot move it. Then there's a second type of muktzah, which is muktzah machmas gufay, that it doesn't really have any use. It's something that just has no use. For example, if you have a stone in the street, if you have wooden beams which are left over from a building project, sand or animals, there's nothing really that you can do with them. You can't eat them, you can't wear them. They don't have a specific stampshus to use. That you can do something with them. So therefore they're muktzah, and they're not considered prepared. So if you want to take this stone, I want to use it for paperweight, you want to learn outside on your porch, and there's a wind blowing, so you want to put a stone on the sefer so the pages don't blow over. So that is, even though you have use for it on Shabbos, but since you didn't dedicate it for this use from before Shabbos, so therefore it is muktzah. Then there's a third type of muktzah, which is a kli shemalachta le'issa. That means that it's something which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos with this keli, and that's its main purpose. So, like for instance, even though it's only also in Rabbanan, for instance, you have a screwdriver. So screwdrivers, their main purpose is to drive in screws. You screw it either into something which is already a building, in which case it will be issa baina to use it on Shabbos, and if you want to put it into a keli, a table or whatever, you want to attach something with a screw, so then you might be over on makbeh patish, or even something else from Rabbanan. And if you hold this binyan b'kelim tikkun mana with on kelim, maybe it's also midraisa, maybe something else midrabanan. Either way, since you can't use it on Shabbos, so its intended use, it's not prepared. And if it's not prepared, it is muktzah. So so even though that you don't want to do anything wrong with it on Shabbos, let's say you have a fan, all electrical appliances are considered kli shemalachta le'issa because you have to turn on electricity, which is also either min Torah or midrabanan, depending on the appliance, and And you can't do it on Shabbos, so it's not prepared in your mind to use on Shabbos. So let's say you have a fan, and the fan is on from before Shabbos. And on Shabbos, you want to, when you go to sleep, you have the fan blowing on you, it's hot, and during the day, you're learning at the table, and you want the fan to blow on you, so you can't move that fan, so then you want the fan to blow on you. I'll discuss that later. But let's say the fan is in a place where you're afraid it'll get stolen, and now you want to take it into the house to make sure that it's safe. So then it is you can't do that because you didn't have intention to use it on Shabbos. Certainly you can't turn it on Shabbos because that's a different issue. It's not muktzah. That's an issue of using electrical appliance, which is also in this case midrabanan, and it is and it will be muktzah. Then there's a different type of muktzah which is called basis l'daba ha'asa. If you put something which muktzah from these three types of muktzah which I already discussed, and you put it, let's say, on a table, since you want the table to hold up this muktzah, let's say you have a radio and you put it on top of the table, and you have it there the whole week. So then comes Shabbos, you need the space on the table, and the question is, can you move the table? The radio is either it is a kli shemachta l'issa, because you have to switch it on in order that it should work. In order to use it for its intended purpose, you have to switch it on. Or it may be muktzah and kiss, if it's a special type of radio, it's a shortwave radio, and you have to be very careful with it, and that it shouldn't fall down. So it might be muktzah and kiss. So in such a case, the basis on which it sits is, since you want it to sit on this table or wherever it's sitting, you'll be mavatal it to the muktzah. And whatever the halacha of this muktzah is going to be the same halacha with this table, even if the muktzah was taken off. It was there ben hashmashas. So then the table, not only is the thing on top muktzah, because you couldn't have das to use it, or you didn't have das to use it, whatever the case may be, the basis is tafel to it and has the same halacha as whatever's on it. And the same way you can't move the radio, you wouldn't be able to move the table either. It has the same halacha. Okay, now there is a different type of muktzah, which is the muktzah of noilad. Now, noilad means it's something all of a sudden appeared on Shabbos. Let's say you have an egg-laying chicken and laid an egg. We say that you didn't lay the egg on Shabbos. You didn't have any intention to eat this egg before Shabbos because it wasn't there. So if it wasn't there, you couldn't have intention to use it, and therefore it will become muktzah. Now, I said before that if it's a basis d'ava ha'asa, even though the muktzah left, it was not on there anymore when you want to move the table, it retains its muktzah. It actually became muktzah ben hashmashas when the thing was on it at that time. Okay, now I just want to say some general halachas about muktzah before we go into the nitty-gritty of these halachas. Muktzah is not asa to touch it. You are allowed, it's only asa to move it. And this applies to all forms of muktzah that I mentioned before. So if the muktzah is hanging, let's say you have a chandelier, and by touching it, it's a hanging chandelier. It's not steadfastly attached to the ceiling. So if it's hanging from a chain, so by touching it, it means that it's going to move it. So of course you can't touch it either because you're moving it. But something which will not move if you touch it, you're allowed to touch it. So now there's another halacha about muktzah. What happens if you had something muktzah in your hand from before Shabbos? So when Shabbos came, when you had it in your hand, you had it beheta. By the time you took it, it wasn't Shabbos yet, so it was a muktzah. In such a case, you do not have to all of a sudden let it drop, whatever it is, but you can take it to whichever place you want to take it to and put it down over there. This is also true about certain things which first became muktzah after you had it in the hand, but before that wasn't muktzah, which maybe I'll discuss later. It's the same halacha. Once you have it in your hand, beheta, you don't have to drop it. You can put it down wherever you feel is a place that you want to put it to. So therefore, if a male, if he has this mila knife which he uses, so you're allowed to use it's not muktzah because before Shabbos he had the das that he's going to do this bris, and even if he didn't actually actually know he's going to have a bris, but we say since he might get a bris, so it's not muktzah. But the whole heter to use it normally the sagan shamila is muktzah machasar and kiss. The heter to use it is for the bris. The same thing with the sagan shashchita. Let's say someone has a bird that he wants to shecht. You can't shecht on Shabbos, but you can shecht on Yontif. So if you can shecht on Yontif under the various guidelines which Chazal say that you can do it, then it's not muktzah on Yontif. But once you already shechted these birds, at this point it becomes muktzah, because now it's muktzah and kiss. Same thing with the sang shel mila. So now that he made the mila, does he have to drop the knife wherever he is because it's muktzah? No, since he had it in his hand beheta, or the sang shel shchit beheta, after the shchita he doesn't have to drop it. He can go and take it and put it back in his in a safe place that no one should get hurt with it. And this is the same thing also, that he can take care of it and he doesn't have to drop right away. Now by the sang shel mila it's also parshat because he needs both hands to make the priya, and so with a knife in his hand it's not so easy to do that. But he doesn't have to drop it. He can put it somewhere, a safe place, like in a drawer, which is near the place of his where he's doing the bris, or whatever. That's okay. Now, there are cases where something can become muktzah on Shabbos. For instance, someone has laundry. In the good old days, they didn't have any dryers, so they used to hang them on the line. So if a person hung up his laundry, which was washed, on the line, let's say midday on Friday, it's a hot day and the sun's shining, and by the time Shabbos came, they were dry already. So then at the beginning of Shabbos, it wasn't muktzah, because they were dry and it was usable. Then he left it on the line, and the rain came on Shabbos, and now it's not usable anymore. So this was not muktzah ben hashmoshes, because ben hashmoshes it was usable. And we say that if it's something which belongs to you, which is usable, you have das to use it. Then the rain came, and now it's not usable, and then the sun shone again, and by the time it came Shor Suda's time, the clothes were dry. So at this point, it's not muktzah anymore. It wasn't muktzah at the beginning of Shabbos, it became muktzah in the middle of Shabbos, And at the end of Shabbos, it wasn't muktzah anymore, because the only time we say "Kim diskatzoi ben ashroshos diskatzoi l'kol yoma" is only if it wasn't prepared from the beginning of Shabbos. But if something happened in the middle of Shabbos, so at the beginning of Shabbos it was prepared, and in the middle of Shabbos something happened, made it not prepared, then if it becomes roy to use in the middle of Shabbos, afterwards the muktzah goes off. So here's a case where something was not muktzah at the beginning and became muktzah on Shabbos. So for some reason the person was moving it from before, she had it in his hand from before it became muktzah, and now it became muktzah. They're not mechuyev to throw it, but they can do whatever they put in a safe place, in a place where the laundry will be clean and they wouldn't have any problems. So if someone has something which normally is muktzah, let's say earth is muktzah, but if he needs earth, he needs it to cover up something that the animals went and they spread some of the excrement on his the front steps towards his house. So he wants to take earth to cover it over, and he knows that they often do this, and he took earth before Shabbos in order to cover over this side. So he wants to use it on Shabbos. The whole reason why it is muktzah is because it's muktzah machzor gufa, because it has no use. But if he dedicated it for use, it's considered not muktzah. And it's, you don't even have to say it, as long as that was his intention when he put away this earth to be able to use it on Shabbos, it's good enough that he can use it on Shabbos. But if something which can use many times, let's say there's a big stone that he wants to use to keep the door open. The door's on a spring that if you don't do anything, the door will close, and you have people making a kiddush, people going in and out, and you want the door to remain open. So you go into the backyard and you get a big stone. It doesn't help just to say that I want to use it for Shabbos. It's not considered prepared for Shabbos unless you decide to use it from now on. Whenever I need a door stopper, I'm going to use the stone. Then it helps. So let's say if someone had milk in the refrigerator, but he thought that it was the regular milk, wasn't the Chol Yisrael, and he's careful about Chol Yisrael. So for him, this milk is muktzah. But then he found out that he made a mistake, and the milk that he had in the refrigerator was Chol Yisrael. So the Chazon Ish says that since the whole thing was a mistake, that he really could use it, he just thought that it wasn't usable for him, so then that's not considered muktzah, because it goes into the general rule of anything a person has that is usable, he doesn't put out his mind to use it, and since this was a mistake, it's considered like he didn't have in mind not to use it, and he can use it. All muktzah you are allowed to move you're allowed to move it with, if you don't use your hands. Like you use other parts of your body, use your elbow, your foot. So those, it's mutter, because they were only geyser on moving it with your hands. So if someone wants to blow on an insect, to blow it off a table or something else like that, he's not touching with his hands. Even though he's causing it to move, it doesn't matter. There's no problem with that. Then there's another heter, that if something is muktzah, let's say you're eating chicken on Shabbos with a bone in it, so you eat the meat, you don't eat the bones, so you leave the bones on the plate. So now the bones are muktzah. They don't have any practical use. Even though that it says in Chazal, if it's roila behema, so then it has a use and it's not muktzah. That's only true if you have a behema. Or if your neighbor has a behema and you normally go and give your neighbor food for his dog. But if you don't have any pet, and he doesn't have, and your neighbor doesn't have any pet, or you don't usually give him anything, so then in your mind you have no use for it, and therefore it would be muktzah. So over here the bones are muktzah. Or if you take nuts, walnuts with a shell, and you crack the nuts and you take off the shells and you put them on your plate, so the shells have no use, and since they have no use, they're muktzah. There's a din of tiltul min hatzad l'tzarech davar hamuta is permitted. That means you're not, so you're allowed to take the whole plate and go to the garbage and tilt over the plate, and the bones or the shells will fall in, and it's okay, because it's tiltul min hatzad. You're not touching them directly. You're touching the plate, and the plate is not muktzah. Even though you may ask a question that why isn't the plate muktzah? Isn't the plate a bosses l'davar asa? It's holding up these shells. So there's an important piece of information over here, that you only consider a bosses l'davar ha'asar where the basis, what it's sitting on, is something that you want to hold up this, you wanted to hold up this, what's on it, the thing which is muktzah, which is on it, and since you've dedicated for this purpose, already from before Shabbos, you've dedicated for this, or at least now it will become a bosses, then it's tuffled to what the muktzah which is on it. So as I said before, you have a radio on the table, and you want it to be on the table, so the table is mashamish the radio to keep it there. So it's tuffled to it, and it has the same halacha like the radio. But over here, it's not the pshat that the plate is being mashamish these bones. A person is not going to miyached a plate for bones, because the bones have no value and they have no chashivas. Mishnah Berurah goes further to say that if a person leaves a couple of cents on his table, or today maybe a couple of nickels or a couple of dimes, and a person not mavatal his table to something which doesn't have too much value. And so therefore the bones and the shells have no value, so therefore there is no din of basel davar asa. So that's some of this is basel. This is some of the general principles. So you're allowed to take the plate because it's a tiltul min hatzad. You're not taking the bones themselves. L'tzarech davar hamuta. That because the purpose why you're doing this, because you want your table to be clean. So that's a davar hamuta. So you're allowed to do that. But if you would need the bones somewhere else, you're making an experiment with these bones, and therefore you want to take them and put them somewhere else, that's a tzarech davar asa. And that would not be muta by the fact that it's tiltul min hatzad. Okay, so let me get a little bit more into this. So you have a kli shemalachta le'issa. There's a special halacha about a kli shemalachta le'issa, that it is only forbidden to use it if you to move it. It's only forbidden to move it if you're moving it for the purpose of the keli itself. Let's say you're afraid it'll get ruined in the place where it is. It's out in the rain, and you want to move it so it shouldn't get ruined. or it's outside and you are afraid if you leave it on your porch, it's going to, someone's going to steal it. So in such a case, you're not doing it, you're doing it for the tzarech hakli, for the keli. So that is asa. But if you're doing the tzarech gufay, or makaimai, if you need the place where it is, or if you need it for something which is mutter to use it for, so then it is mutter by klish machal issa. So let's say you have a hammer. A hammer is dedicated usually for building, which is asa. But now you have a coconut and you want to crack it, and you need a hammer to bang on it, and so you're allowed to crack nuts on Shabbos. So in such a case, you're allowed to take the hammer and bang on it as you need to in order to crack the shell of the coconut. Now, Mishnah Berurah says that this is only true if you don't have anything which is mutter to do it with, but if this is the only practical thing that you have to use to do it, it's considered the tzarech gufay and it's mutter. So the for tzarech makaimai, that means if it's on the table and you need the place someone has to eat there, or someone wants to learn there, or whatever else, you need the space. So then you're allowed to move it in order to be able to do what you need to do. But for the tzarech hakeli, that it shouldn't get ruined or that it shouldn't get stolen, it is asa. Now, all electrical appliances, as I said before, are considered a klish melachta issa. There may be some other reasons for the issa, but for sure they're klish melachta issa. So if someone has a clock which he has in his bedroom, and he can't see it because it's on the night table between the two beds, and it's going straight out, and so he can't see it unless he moves it a little bit. So you're allowed to move it because it's a klish melachta issa, and it's mutter tzarech gufay. So this is tzarech gufay. You have to see, the whole purpose of a clock is to see the time. So this is considered tzarech gufay. So you're allowed to move it in order to see what the time is. So even though that typically you can get up and take a look at it, but you don't want to get up, especially if the time is early. You want to keep on sleeping, and it'll be more difficult if once you get up. So you're not mukhi to do that. So this heta al tzarech gufay mekaima is only by klish melachta issa. It does not apply by something which is muktzah machmas gufay or something which is muktzah machmas kasar and kiss. So as far as the din of basar davar asa goes, which I mentioned before, that the basar has a din of the muktzah on it. So if what's on it is a klish melachta issa, so let's say it's a radio, which is a klish melachta issa, so then even though the radio has been removed from the table, and the table remains muktzah because it was there ben hashmashas, but you're allowed to move the table tzarech gufay mekaima because the table is not more chama than the muktzah which is on it. Now, is that type of a radio, let's say a shortwave radio, which may be muktzah machmas kasar and kiss, which can't move even tzarech gufay mekaima, so then you wouldn't be able to move the table even with tzarech gufay mekaima. So so if someone has meat that was taken out of the freezer and put on the table, it wasn't cooked yet. So since it wasn't cooked and it's not edible for most people will not eat raw meat, and therefore it is considered muktzah, unless you have a dog around that will eat it, but already we discussed that. You have no dog, so then it's muktzah, so then the whole table is muktzah, the whole Shabbos, if you left it on there from the beginning of Shabbos, even if they took off the meat. Now what happens if someone bought soda for Shabbos, and he drove up in his driveway and he forgot to take out the soda before Shabbos. Now he wants to know, can he take out the soda, can he open up the trunk of his car on Shabbos and take out the soda? Now I'm talking with, there's no question of Hoitzah, there's an air around his house or in the city, and there is, so if by opening up the trunk, the light will go on, so then there's no way you can open up. It's not a question of muktzah anymore, it's a question of putting on a light on Shabbos, which probably will be an Issa D'Oraisa. But the, so there's no talk about that. But let's say the light doesn't work, and now you want to open up the trunk. So the trunk is part of the car, and the car is muktzah. So when we're talking about muktzah, even though you don't move the whole car, you just move part of the car, it is also an issa muktzah. So therefore, if you have an appliance and it's not plugged in, and you want to switch it on, nothing's going to happen. Since the whole appliance is muktzah, the dial or the switch which was on is also muktzah. And even though you're not moving the whole appliance, just the switch, it is also asa. So now getting back to the soda in the trunk. So if no light goes on and there's no question of Hoitzah, you're allowed to open the trunk. Why? Because even though the trunk is part of the car, which is muktzah, a car is klish machal issa, which is mutal tzarku from mekaymai. So when you open up the trunk, you're allowed to do it because it's tzarech mekaymai. You need the space, the place of the trunk in order to get the soda out. Without moving it, it's impossible to get it out without moving the trunk. So you have to move up the trunk, move it, open it in order to get it out. Now you took it out, and you brought it in the house. Now the question is, can you close the trunk? Because it's still muktzah. It was only mutter tzarku from mekaymai. So we say, if you have other things in the trunk, let's say you have a spare tire, or you have other things in the trunk, and you're afraid that if you leave the trunk open, that someone might steal the contents of the trunk, so then you need a gufa. You need it in order to protect the contents, so you're allowed to close it also. Now, that's all assuming that the car is a klish machal issa. But if you have a new Lexus that you just bought, and then it's considered muktzah machal son kiss, where there's no hetel tzarku from mekaymai. So then these heterim do not apply, so you can't do it. Now, if you have an old jalopy or a car that you don't care if children play near it, you're not so nervous about it because it already has a few dents and a few scratches. So this one, if they'll get another scratch, it might be bottle b'shishim or whatever. It doesn't matter. It is in such a case, what I said applies. It's only muktzah machal son kiss, because it's only muktzah machal issa, because you're not allowed to drive a car on Shabbos, and that's the main purpose of the car, is to get from one place to the other. So therefore, it is muktzah, and it's tzarku mekaymai mutter. So if for some reason children want to play and sit in the back seat of the car or the front seat of the car, if that's safe for them to do that, so then it is tzarech gufa, you're using it. So v'mutter. Now, if they have a different place where to play, the Mishnah says it's only if you need it. But if this is what they want to play, and they don't have anything similar to this, so then it would be mutter based on what I mentioned before. Now, if you can close it or not, if there's a chash that maybe if the door's open, that they'll be able to get into the car and drive off with the car, it says again, it's considered the tzarech gufa, and it would be mutter. Now, if it's a klish melachta issa, no, I'm sorry. Now, what is the klish melachta issa? What happens if it's used for issa and heta? So you go after the rov, melachta, and the Achronim say that rov melachta is the rov melachta that it would be used for on Shabbos. but not, it's like because if on Shabbos it's used for something else and use it during the week, so you go after what it would be used for on Shabbos. Now, if you have a shofar, you can't blow it on Shabbos. You're not allowed to blow on Shabbos, midrabanan. So it's a klish machla issa, it is muktzah. On Rosh Hashanah it is mutter, but after you finish blowing, you should not be metatlit anymore, even though that if it's such a case where people know you're not about the shofar and someone who didn't hear the shofar might come to ask you, so then it doesn't become muktzah right away. But if you're in a place where no one's going to come and ask you, once you finish blowing, so then it is muktzah, just like a sakan shamila. You have it in your hand, you go and put it wherever you want, but after that it's considered muktzah. As far as a clock goes, so like a wristwatch is not muktzah, even though it's a clay medida, it's a keli which you use for measuring, and measuring is also midrabanan. But since you wear it on your hand, and you're not missing a das from using it, because you use it the whole time. So therefore, you're just looking at it, and therefore, even if it's considered klish machla issa, which not so 100%, because maybe that kind of medida, they didn't ask a measurement of time. Rabbi Moshe says that you're allowed to use a thermometer on Shabbos because it measures heat, and that isn't used in business, at least not in the times of Chazal. So I think measuring time probably wasn't used in business either. But if it is, watch is not considered muktzah. But if it is a grandfather clock that you have, some person say that it's considered muktzah, which means that it will be only mutter for tzarech gufay or makaimai, which there are not too many cases of tzarech gufay or makaimai by a grandfather clock. Tefillin is a machlokes if it's considered like a klish machla issa, because you don't put on tefillin on Shabbos, or since b'shas hadchak, let's say you find tefillin in the street, you're makom bezoyin, so you're allowed to put them on Shabbos and take them to a makom meshuma. So b'diavad you're allowed to put them on. So maybe it's not considered a klish machla issa. We say that b'diavad you can be samach lahakol, and that has to do with if you have your tefillin and in your talis bag, and your tefillin on top of your talis, is the talis considered a basla dava asa? But anyway, we mutter tzoku mukam, because in the worst case it's only klish machla issa. Now there is a svara to say that tefillin today muktzah machla saran kiss. When I bought my tefillin, that was not my first tefillin. I went to Mohudidiga pair. I had a kosher pair. My father, Baruch Hashem, gave me a kosher pair of tefillin with no question. But I wanted a special Mohudidiga pair, so I went to a special Sefer Talmid Chacham that should get me the most Mohudidiga pair that he could get. And after he had the tefillin ready, he excused himself that he's charged so much money for the tefillin, but this tefillin, there was something special about it, so he felt that I would want it. It was $85 together with the parshas. So that's how much it cost. This is about some time ago. But today, where they can cost $1,000 or more, so then it might be considered muktzah machla chasar and kiss. And then the halacha will be a little bit different. Now, so the tefillin on top of the talis, if it's muktzah machla chasar and kiss, then we have there may be other heterim that you don't care that the talis is there. You're not trying to make the talis hold up your tefillin. If there wouldn't be a talis there, you'd be also happy. You know, it's not used to, the pub is not to hold it up, but you have no other place, which is this a heter which says in the Chai Adam and the Mishnah Berurah that is not considered a basis. Now, let me say a couple of words about muktzah machmas gufay. So if you have wood lying around that doesn't have any specific purpose, so you're not allowed to, if you have a board, you're not allowed to use it to cover a pot, or to put under a bed to hold up the bed because one of the legs buckled, or whatever other you use it, because muktzah gufa is also, even so guma kaimai, is only a heta baklisha malachta le'isa. So meat that I mentioned before that is not cooked, so it's muktzah machmas gufay. If you have a salted fish like a herring, since you can eat it without being cooked, so then it is considered it's not considered muktzah at all, since you can eat it. Now, so there's a heta for graf shari'i. Let's say you have a bag of garbage. No, I'm not talking about recyclable garbage. I'm talking about garbage that smells and is disgusting. That the Chacham made a exclusion to the din of muktzah, that even though that normally has no use, you want to get rid of it, you want to throw it out. But a person, the Chacham didn't expect a person to live in a place where you have graf shari'i, which literally means you have a container with excrement in it, whether from a human being or a dog. It smells and it's disgusting. So the Chacham didn't say you have to live with that. So you're allowed to take it out of your house. But once it's out of your house, it's muktzah. So let's say on Yom Tov, if you have garbage and you put it outside in your backyard, and now they're picking up the garbage on Yom Tov, you can't take it from the backyard and bring it to the front, because at this point you don't have a het of graf shari'i. It is muktzah. You're allowed to take it out of the house and put it in your backyard, or you can take it out of the house and put it on the street right away. But you cannot take it out, because once you took it by heta, like I said, you're allowed to take it wherever you want to take it to. But once it's out of the house, there is no heta of graf shari'i. Now, to move an animal or a bird, they're muktzah, even though they are pets, and if they're pets, you want to use them on Shabbos. You want to play with them, you want to do whatever. So I would think they're like toys for a child. They're not muktzah because they use them, so you use this pet. So in Asfar, we should say that they're not muktzah, but the Shulchan Aruch says they're muktzah, and it's very difficult to paskin against the Shulchan Aruch. Now, cans of food actually are muktzah, because since you can't open them on Shabbos, they have no use for you. And since they have no use at this point, even though they'll have a use in the future, they're considered muktzah machmas gufay, not machmas issa. The purpose of a can is not to do an issa with it. The purpose of a can is to eat the food which is in it. So those cans are muktzah machmas gufam. And however, if you have a guy available in the house, and the minig is to be makel to open cans with a guy, so then you did have das to use what's in the can, and then it is, you can tell the guy to open them and you're allowed to eat the food inside. But if you don't have a guy available and for some reason someone opened the can, so then since the whole can was muktzah from before Shabbos, the contents are also muktzah. And even after the can was opened, you can't eat the food that was inside. By muktzah, you go after the owner. And if it's considered muktzah machal kiss for the owner, it's muktzah machal kiss for everyone who wants to move this item. So the Gemara speaks that if you have a piece of cloth which are 3 inches by 3 inches, that for an ani it has a use, because you can use it to put a patch on his clothing. But for an usher, it doesn't have any use unless it's foot by a foot, 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim, because he doesn't put patches on his clothes. But the 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim is like a foot by a foot, 12 inches by 12 inches, which handkerchief is that size, and they have a use for it. So if the owner of this cloth is an ani, and it has the shear of 3 inches by 3 inches, gimlet spars, all gimlet spars, then it's not muktzah for him, and it's not muktzah for anyone else in that who wants to move it. But if he's an usher and it's muktzah for him, then it'll be muktzah for the ani who's in the house also, because you go after the bottom. Because the one who has to the one who has to have the achana in his mind is the owner. So it is all totally the owner. So let's say you have a napkin by the table. So a couple of drops spilled on it. So since you can still use it to clean up some mess, and the person who wants to use it, so it doesn't become muktzah. But once he went and threw it in the garbage, and now all of a sudden he realizes he needs it. At that point he was megal das that it's not has no chashivas for him. It's muktzah machos gufa, and then it doesn't. He can't use it afterwards. If rain comes down, it says in the Gemara that it's not muktzah, even though it's noilat. The rain wasn't here yesterday that we should be able to say that he had das on it. So the Gemara says Maya ba'eva mivli bli. The water is in the clouds. They're in the clouds. They didn't come out of the clouds yet. They're here. And so therefore, if a person wants to put out something to catch the water, to use the water for whatever purposes he wants to do it, even for washing dishes, or he wants to use it if he can drink it or whatever, as long as the water is usable, the water is not muktzah. Insecticides, since they're used to kill insects, they are muktzah on Shabbos because you can't kill insects. But on Yom Tov, they're not muktzah because you're allowed to kill an insect on Yom Tov because so therefore you can, since you can use them on Yom Tov, they are not considered muktzah. The muktzah machmas on kiss, as we said, is asa even soku makamai, and that's a kelim which people are makpid on, like we spoke. So paper is paper in former times was considered muktzah machmas on kiss. People were very careful not to let children play with paper because paper was expensive, and if they play with it, it probably won't be usable anymore to write on. So they were makpid on them. But today, I don't think people are makpid too much on paper. Paper is cheap, and the child will mess it up, so you get more paper. So I don't think that it's not muktzah machmas on kiss at all. Now, if you have a pamphlet or a notebook where some pages are written on and some pages are not, even though most of the pages are not written on, so they're not considered muktzah because the person is not maktzah his das from this pamphlet. If things are written on, he wants to look at it, so it has use for him, and therefore it is not. It's not muktzah. Now, someone has medicine, pills, or other medicine. If he had an infection and he had to take antibiotics and he has some left over, but now it's all healed up and he's not taking them, so he's not intending to use them, and so then we say that it's muktzah. And once it's muktzah for him, he can't give it to someone else who needs it, because since it's muktzah for the bailam, it's muktzah for everyone. If he does have a tzad that he might need to use it, or let's say someone has Tylenol or Motrin or these kind of medicines, aspirin, that a person might need at any time, If that's that type of medicine, so then they're not muktzah, because you say la maktzah inish ma'idachazalei. Now, really, the din of muktzah are rechavim miniyam. That we could spend a lot of time speaking about it, but the time is limited. And I just want to mention that more than I've said to you is about muktzah, and therefore we should keep this in mind. This is just cream off the top of the milk, and Mr. Shem, the Baruch should help that we should be zeicher to know all the din muktzah and all the din of Shabbos. And in the schus limud Torah, we should be zeicher to the Mashiach. Amen.